We're here with Jake. He's a Missouri farmer and works with, or is it your organization, Local Roots?
That's my firm. Yeah, Local Root Strategies is our firm.
And what does Local Root Strategies do?
So Local Root Strategies is I've been working in sort of food and farm politics for 20 years, and so it's the way that we started a consulting firm so that we could help lots of different organizations and political candidates and other folks, for that matter, think about what are the things that a lot of people don't think about. What are the nuances to farm policy? How should we be building our sort of food system, our farm system in the future through government action, whether that's county, state, federal. So.
Absolutely. And well, your organization is why I get to be here today, so I really appreciate the opportunity and you putting all this on. And we've been talking a lot about all of the policy changes that we'd like to see made and all of the kind of problems with farm policy there is today. But unfortunately, with the political climate, making any of those changes is not a real short-term solution. However, agricultural industry has really consolidated to a point where saying monopoly isn't even being hyperbolic at this point. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, look, we've got 4 companies that control 85% of the beef market. I mean, think of that.
And that's global, right?
Yeah, global. And so what you end up with is, the other thing we used to say, right, is when we were talking about this word monopoly, we used to use this weird wonky phrase called a CR4, or concentration rate of 40% for 4 companies. If they control more than 40% of the marketplace, then it's a monopoly, right? And now we've got 4 companies that control 85%. I mean, the only other piece of context I'll offer to that is that lots of people know this book, The Jungle, that Upton Sinclair wrote, right? We only had 52% consolidation of the beef market then when that book was written, and it was all about the beef monopoly, right? And the meat packing monopolies.
Pork, yeah.
We got way more of that now than we had even then, so.
And so, I mean, bringing it back to Upton Sinclair, that was the time that antitrust laws really started getting put on the books to try to break up these monopolies and make sure that we had a competitive free market capitalist society that functioned for everybody rather than devolving into an oligarchy. Those laws are still on the books, are they not?
Oh yeah, it's one of those things where we had this moment at the turn of the century. We had the turn from the 1800s to the 1900s. We had a real revolution in this country. We basically said, like, we're not going to let the robber barons take us. The farmers stood together, the workers stood together. We passed laws like the Clayton and Sherman Act, the Packers and Stockyards Act, which is like literally the agriculture industry, the folks who are in livestock production. They have a law that was passed in 1921 dedicated to saying the meat packers can't become a monopoly and they shouldn't be taking advantage of you as farmers. And we really enforced those laws all the way up until the late 1970s.
When a certain, not a cowboy but plays one on TV came onto the scene.
Sure,
And so this was a time that we saw a huge consolidation in corporate America across the board, right? A huge transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top, a huge transfer of political and economic power from the bottom to the top, consolidated with very few people. And I think that the agricultural industry has probably been hit the hardest by that.
Yeah.
I mean, far and away. And we don't talk about it because the agricultural industry, even though it affects every single one of our lives every single day, it's the food we eat, it's the food our food eats, it's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry that drives every aspect of the economy. But as a regular consumer, you don't interact with it in that kind of way every day. You don't see it like you see with the big tech and all that stuff that people interact with. So how can the laws that are already on the books be a catalyst? How can we try to get those enforced and start fixing some of these problems? Because like I said, passing new legislation isn't going to happen right away, right now. That takes time in a good time when we have a government that's working for the people. And when we have a government that's not really interested in working for the people, it's nearly impossible. How do we get back to even, 50% in the Upton Sinclair days seems good. How do we get back to that?
Yeah. Well, look, we got, there's 3 agencies at the federal level we should be talking about when we're talking about antitrust enforcement. We've got the Federal Trade Commission, and this our former chair of the Federal Trade Commission, Lena Khan, had been doing a great job at taking on some of these monopolies. Yeah, everything to people don't know this, but we have a law on the books that basically says that grocery stores can't drive all the grocery stores in your community out of business and then drive up prices or screw over those people that are selling those laws hadn't been enforced. And so Lena Khan was trying to do some of that enforcement. You've also got the Department of Justice, who right now, if they got aggressive, they could go out and they could start digging into concentration in, say, the chemical industry, right? We've got a couple of chemical companies who control all of the fertilizer.
Well, Monsanto
and
really the big one, right?
right, which is owned by Bayer now, which is a German company, right?
The fact that they allowed that merger to go
That
through
merger
is
to
just
even-
absolutely insane.
That's right. And so you've got the Department of Justice who could do more. Unfortunately, we're seeing this administration allow a lot of mergers occurring for whatever reason they might decide. But then you've also got one of the few very specific agencies, U.S. Department of Agriculture, for years and years and years had a division. Their sole job was to enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act. Now, that was rolled back in the first Trump administration, but we saw folks like John Tester and others putting forward ideas of like, we need to beef back up that. But you don't need legislation to do that at USDA. If Secretary Rollins is ready to say, let's take on big ag, let's do it. Like, we can right now start enforcing a whole bunch of infractions from all the meat packers that are really manipulating small farmers who got stuck in these contract growing systems in our factory farms. All those sorts of things can be done right now. We don't need Congress to act on those.
So that offers a little bit of help and silver lining in this current situation, especially with the impending farm crisis as farmers are facing right now. There's a lot of attention and a lot of pressure on farm policy, farm action, and how that can be affected. So what can people do to try to push and pressure to get these things done, again, under the current infrastructure that we already have?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that at least it's a little bit bipartisan antitrust enforcement. It's come back into vogue. Even, frankly, J.D. Vance, before he became vice president, was working with people like Elizabeth Warren to press for antitrust enforcement. You've got, I'm from the state of Missouri, you've got Josh Hawley, who goes up and rails about Facebook and other folks and credit card fees and the monopolies in the credit card sector. Those folks need to get active, and we need to find ways to work together to pressure our agencies. They don't have to pass a new law. They can be asking for this administration to make that enforcement. So it's time for people, farmers, rural folks, frankly, folks who are just worried about whether we're going to keep producing the food that we eat here. I don't know if you know, but we're running a trade deficit now, a giant trade deficit.
I thought the tariffs were going to fix all that. I was told on very good authority that the best negotiator in the world, was going to fix our trade deficit.
We have this giant trade deficit in agriculture where we're importing most of the food that we eat, right? So,
which makes no sense because we produce enough if you
spread it out and you produce the right things, the things people want to eat, right?
We produce enough to feed the entire world.
Yes, right. So the short answer to that question is really that people need to demand that this administration right now start taking as much action as possible. They need to put pressure on folks that are on both sides of the aisle, of course, to say time to enforce those antitrust laws. It's also true that state attorney generals have a lot of power to enforce antitrust issues in their states, and we can be asking for our attorney generals to do more.
Absolutely. And I think that is something that's important to say, is that it's an incredibly divisive time right now, but antitrust is bipartisan. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If you're not the top 1%, you want things to be better for your local communities. You want local farmers and local businesses to thrive. You want that money to stay in your community and have those jobs. And I think that this is something that, in a time where we can't get anything done bipartisan-wise, this is something that Republicans and Democrats alike, whatever side of the aisle you're on, can push your Congress people to be like, this is what I want.
Yep, that's right.
And I don't think it's going to be unpopular with any voter anywhere. So
yeah, I mean, the billionaires, right, in the corporate boardroom are going to be pretty frustrated about that. But the truth of the matter is that like you said, I mean, working people, families, they just want tools and opportunities to get ahead, right? They want to try to have a better life. We saw recently that people just sort of don't believe the American dream is real anymore. That's all because of concentration in this system, corporate power that's taken over the entire sector, and particularly agriculture. And so in the long run, the vast majority of voters, the vast majority of people out there listening to you and me, they're going to be interested in this idea of let's take back some of that corporate power, give it back to independent farmers who want to grow our food. That's where I think the best choices are going to get made. If we shift our subsidy systems, and we shift our antitrust enforcement back to focusing on things that independent family farmers want, and the food that they want to grow for their communities, that's where we end up being the best off. And I think that's bipartisan. I think everybody can agree with
Absolutely
that.
bipartisan, and I think it's some place that we actually have room to make some progress in a time where no progress seems to be made anywhere.
Yep,
So
exactly.
call your representatives,
Yep.
call your attorney generals. Again,
Yep,
that's a
yep.
huge thing people forget, but states have a lot of power to enforce this kind of stuff,
That's
and to really just put the pressure on, even if the lawsuits that they file aren't successful, it starts putting the pressure on of what people are expecting.
Yep. That's
So
right.
thank you so much for putting all this on.
Yep.
This is really incredible. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it. I'm having
Yep.
a great time, and you're doing really incredible
So good
work
to meet
here.
you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Yep.